Will you save me from my stepfather? Little boy begged the bikers. What the hell's Angels did next shocked everyone. He hadn't slept in 4 nights. Not really. A kid shouldn't know what real fear feels like, but Mason did. He felt it every time headlights swept across his bedroom wall. He felt it every time footsteps creaked in the hallway after midnight. And he felt it worst of all at dawn, when he had to walk to school knowing that the man waiting back home would still be there when he returned. 9 years old. 9. And carrying a kind of terror grown men struggle to name. That Thursday morning, something inside him cracked. Maybe it was the bruises he couldn't fully hide anymore. Maybe it was the way his teacher pretended not to notice. Maybe it was the fact that the police had come twice and left twice, calling everything domestic conflict, like that made it okay. Whatever it was, Mason reached his breaking point. And he did something no frightened child should ever have to do. He walked across the parking lot of a biker bar. If you're watching this right now, tell me, where are you tuning in from? Your country, your city. I want to know how far Mason's story travels. Because what happened next wasn't just a rescue. It was a spark that exposed a darkness the whole town had ignored. And it all started with a 9-year-old boy standing in front of the most feared men in the county. Mason's school backpack bounced against his spine as he crossed the cracked asphalt of Ridgeway Avenue. Cars whooshed by, but he barely heard them. His heart pounded so loudly it drowned out everything else. The Iron Serpent's Motorcycle Club's bar, the pit stop, sat on the corner, its blacked-out windows and row of chrome Harleys gleaming under the rising sun. Everyone in town knew the Serpents. Veterans, welders, mechanics, outcasts, but disciplined, loyal, and territorial. People whispered about them. Kids feared them. Grown men avoided eye contact. But Mason saw something different. He saw safety. He didn't fully understand why. Maybe because no one messed with the Serpents. Maybe because they looked like the only people strong enough to stop a monster like his stepfather. Or maybe because last week, when he passed by on his way to school, one of them, Tank, had held the door open for an elderly woman and called her ma'am. Brutal men don't do that, he'd thought. Now he was standing in front of the door, shaking so hard he could hardly lift his hand to knock. Inside, voices rumbled. Laughter. The clink of mugs. Boots on wood. He pushed the door open. The bar went silent. 10 men turned their heads. Leather cuts. Tattoos. Long beards. Heavy boots. Men built like they'd been carved from boulders. And in the center of it all sat Bear, president of the Iron Serpents. Broad shoulders, gray-streaked beard, eyes that could read a man's soul like an open book. But those eyes softened the second they landed on the boy. Mason's throat tightened. Tears stung, but he forced them back. He couldn't cry. Not here. He needed to be brave. Brave enough to say the words that had kept him awake for days. Bear leaned forward on his elbows. You lost, kid. Mason swallowed hard. And no, sir. Bear nodded slowly. Then what can we do for you? This was it. The moment. The one impossible sentence he'd practiced whispering under his blanket, but never thought he'd actually say out loud. He squeezed the straps of his backpack until his knuckles turned white. Will you? His voice cracked. Will you save me from my stepdad? The room went still again, but this time it felt heavy. Electric. Tank stood from his bar stool. Ghost's jaw clenched. Razor cursed under his breath. Every serpent suddenly sat straighter, as if a switch had flipped. Bear didn't move. He just blinked once, slow and hard, like someone shutting down a rage surge. Kid, Bear said quietly, look at me. Mason lifted his eyes. Is he hurting you? Mason nodded. A tiny nod. But enough. Bear exhaled through his nose, making a growl. Anybody in this town tried helping you? The police came, Mason whispered. But he said I fell. And they believed him. And your mom. She's scared of him too. Ghost muttered, Jesus. Tank took a step closer, boots echoing across the floor. Kid, you know what happens if you walk into a biker bar and say something like that? Mason shook his head. Tank's voice softened. It means you're ours now. Understand. Bear shot Tank a warning glare, But the truth was already out. The serpents protected their own. Even if their own was a shaking 9-year-old boy in a faded Spider-Man hoodie. Bear stood, 6'4", 250 pounds. A wall of muscle, leather, and fury, not at Mason, but for him. He walked around the table, crouched down so he was eye level with the boy, and rested one giant hand on Mason's shoulder. "We're going to take care of this," Bear said. "You're safe now. You hear me?" Mason nodded again, this time with the first flicker of hope he'd felt in years. Bear raised his chin toward the rest of the serpents. "Gear up. Now. Nobody lays a hand on a kid in my town." Boots thundered. Leather creaked. Engines outside began to roar. And just like that, the iron serpents moved. Not with chaos. With purpose. With fury. With the kind of resolve that only men who have seen war carry inside them. Because a little boy asked for help. And for the serpents, that was all it took. The engines outside roared like an earthquake rolling across Ridgeway Avenue. Mason had heard motorcycles before, but never like this. Never with the kind of thunder that made the windows tremble in their frames. It didn't sound like machines, it sounded like a promise. A promise that something in his life was about to change forever. Bear kept one steady hand on Mason's shoulder as the boy flinched at the noise. "Easy, kid," he murmured. "That sounds on your side now." Tank shouldered the door open, a black leather wall of muscle and tattoos stepping into the sunlight. Ghost followed, silent and calculating, always watching angles, exits, threats. Razor cracked his knuckles, muttering something about breaking someone's face respectfully. But Bear didn't move yet. He stayed crouched in front of Mason like the whole world had shrunk to just that moment. "You got a safe place to go right now?" he asked. Mason shook his head. "If he sees me before school, he gets mad. If I come home after school and he's drunk, he gets madder." Bear's jaw flexed. One tiny movement, but it held the weight of 1,000 unspoken curses. "All right," Bear said. "Then you're walking with us." Mason blinked. "To school." Bear smiled. Not a big smile, just enough to soften the scars on his face. "To school. And onward, if we need to." Razor leaned in. "Boss, you sure about talking him in broad daylight? Town's gonna lose its mind." Bear didn't break eye contact with Mason. "Good." And that one word sealed everything. Tank returned from outside. "We good to roll?" Ghost nodded. "Perimeter's clear." No sign of stepdad's vehicle anywhere on Ridgeway. Bear stood, big and slow. "Let's move." Mason swallowed. His hands were shaking again, part fear, part disbelief. Are they all coming with us?" "All of us." Tank chuckled. "Buddy, this is nothing. You should see what happens when we're mad." Ghost smacked the back of Tank's head. "He doesn't need that visual right now, idiot." Bear shot them both a look, then opened the door and stepped aside. "After you, Mason." The morning sun hit the boy's face as he walked out. The serpents' bikes lined the curb like armored beasts, chrome gleaming, exhaust pipes steaming in the cool air. A few passers-by froze at the sight of the kids stepping out of the bar with the bikers. One woman gasped. Another man shook his head and muttered something to himself. No one dared to step closer. Mason felt small, but not the scared kind of small he felt at home. This was different. This was small in a crowd of giants who had chosen to stand around him. Bear climbed onto his bike, but didn't start it yet. Tank mounted his own and patted the seat behind him. "You're with me, little man," he said. Mason hesitated. "I've never ridden on one before." Tank grinned. "Then today's your first. And don't worry, Bear'll kill me if anything happens to you." "That's supposed to comfort him?" Ghost asked. "Shut up," Tank replied. Bear leaned over. "You don't have to get on if you don't want to. We can walk you, too." Mason looked at the distance to school. He'd walked it hundreds of times, alone, anxious, hoping no one would notice the bruises. But today? Today he didn't want to walk alone. "I'll ride," he whispered. Tank's huge hands helped him up, adjusting the helmet. Ghost passed over and tightening the strap under his chin. "You ready?" Tank asked. Mason nodded. Tank fired up the engine. The sound was thunder, but this time it felt safe. Bear started his bike next, then Ghost, then Razor, then the second wave of serpents who had rolled in after hearing Bear's voice message. Kid in trouble. Move. The road filled with leather and steel. People came out of shops. Cars slowed. Windows rolled down. Phones lifted to record. Because the iron serpents were doing something they didn't normally do. Something loud. Something public. Something impossible to ignore. They rode as one, surrounding Tank and Mason like a moving fortress. Mason tightened his fingers into Tank's vest. Are we gonna get in trouble? Tank tilted his head so Mason could hear him over the wind. If we do, it'll be the best kind of trouble. When they reached Brookside Elementary, teachers standing outside for morning drop-off froze. Minivans halted mid-turn. Parents gasped, clutching their kids' backpacks tighter. Bear pulled into the front lot and cut the engine. The others followed, forming a protective half-circle around Mason as Tank lifted him down from the bike. The front doors opened, and the school counselor, Mrs. Green, stepped out with a horrified expression. Mason? Oh my goodness, what on earth? Bear stepped forward. Morning, ma'am. She blinked. You brought a motorcycle club to a school? No, Bear said calmly. He did. He rested a hand on Mason's shoulder. This little man asked for help. And when a child asks us for help, we give it. Mrs. Green looked at Mason, really looked, and her face changed. Mason, sweetheart, did something happen at home? Mason's voice trembled, but he nodded, and that tiny nod changed everything. Ghost tapped Bear's arm. Boss, incoming. A beat-up red truck screeched into the lot. Mason froze. Tank cursed. That's him. Mason's stepfather threw the door open and stormed out, eyes bloodshot, expression twisted with rage. He pointed at Mason. You little rat. You're dead when we get home. The serpents moved as one. Bear stepped in front of Mason. Not today. The stepfather stalked forward. Who the hell do you think you people are? That's my kid. Bear's voice came out low and cold. No, he's a child. You're a problem. Teachers backed away. Parents screamed. Someone shouted for the principal. Someone else already had 911 on the line. Mason's stepfather lunged, but he never got close. Tank intercepted him with one arm across the chest, shoving him back without even trying. Touch him again, Tank growled, and you'll be eating through a straw. Sirens wailed in the distance. Bear knelt beside Mason again, calm amidst the chaos. You did the right thing coming to us, he said, and we're not leaving. Mason finally let the tears fall, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. Blue and red lights flashed across the schoolyard as two police cruisers rolled up, sirens cutting off at the curb. Teachers froze. Parents pulled their kids closer. Every pair of eyes shifted between the cops, and the iron serpent's MC standing in a half circle around Mason. Bear didn't move. Tank stood with his arms folded. Ghost flicked a toothpick from one side of his mouth to the other, and Razor, normally the hothead, kept perfectly still, gaze fixed on the school doors. Mason huddled behind Bear's leg, trembling. The first officer, a tall guy with a graying buzz cut, stepped out. All right, he said loudly. We got a call from the school about some kind of disturbance. His sentence died as he fully registered the scene. A group of patched bikers. A shaking little boy. A crowd is watching. Bear raised one hand, slow and controlled. No disturbance, he said. Just making sure the kid stays safe. The officer's eyes narrowed. Safe from who? Mason opened his mouth before Bear could answer. My stepdad, he said, voice cracking. He grabbed me this morning. He told me if I told anyone he'd. He stopped, swallowing hard. The second officer, a woman with sharp eyes, softened something in her posture. Mason, sweetheart, someone hurt you? Tank muttered under his breath. Someone's about to have a real bad day. Bear shot him a look. Tank clamped his mouth shut. The female officer crouched down. Did your stepdad put his hands on you today? Mason nodded. Slow. Hesitant. Afraid. And your mom? Is she okay? She asked gently. She cried. Mason whispered. and said sorry. But she always says sorry. Tank's jaw flexed. Ghost stopped chewing the toothpick. Razor's fists slowly curled. The officers exchanged a look. This was no longer a disturbance. It was a domestic abuse case involving a minor. Bear, the male officer said, we're going to need to speak with the boy privately. Tank took one step forward. Ghost put a hand over his chest instantly, stopping him. Bear didn't move at all. He simply placed his hand on Mason's shoulder. Kid, he said quietly, you want to go talk to them? Just talk. We'll be right here. Mason stared up at him with wide, terrified eyes. Will he know I told? Not if we do our job, Bear said. And trust me, he ain't laying a finger on you again. Mason hesitated, then slowly stepped toward the female officer. She guided him gently toward the open door of the cruiser, not inside, just beside it, where everyone could still see him. As Mason talked, his voice low and shaky, Bear listened from a distance. Razor leaned in. Boss, you think they'll actually protect him? Cops don't always follow through. Bear didn't look away from Mason. They will, he said. Because if they don't. Ghost finished the sentence for him, voice soft as gravel. The iron serpents will. The police suddenly stiffened, looking toward the street. Razor spotted it first. A black sedan. Peeling paint. Front bumper dented. The engine didn't turn off when it was parked. Tank let out a slow, dark exhale. Is that him? Bear's eyes hardened. Yeah, he said. That's him. The stepdad had arrived, and he was marching straight toward the school entrance. The battered black sedan lurched into a crooked stop, the engine rattling before it finally cut off. The driver's door flew open so violently that it bounced off its own hinges. Mason's stepdad, Gordon, stumbled out. Not drunk, not high, just furious. His face was red, jaw clenched, hair matted like he'd been yanking at it in the car. The moment teachers saw him storming across the lot, fear rippled through the crowd. A few stepped back. One whispered, "That's him, that's the guy." Gordon wasn't looking at them. His eyes were locked on Mason, and Mason froze mid-sentence beside the officer. His breathing hitched. His hands curled into fists. His knees trembled the way a kid's knees tremble when every warning, every bruise, every threat suddenly walks straight toward him with that same expression he sees at home. Bear moved first. Not fast, not aggressive, just a single step. Enough to place himself directly between Gordon and Mason. Tank, Ghost, and Razor widened the formation behind him. The female officer stood and lifted a hand. "Sir, you need to stay back. We're conducting an interview." Gordon ignored her. "You little rat," he snarled, loud enough for half the school to hear. "I told you what would happen if you started talking." Mason flinched. Bear didn't. He spoke without raising his voice. "You're done," he said. Gordon snapped his attention to Bear. "Move. That's my kid." Tank's laugh was low and humorless. "Your kid? You mean the one you grab by the arm so hard he bruises?" "That kid." "Shut your mouth," Gordon spat at him. Ghost stepped forward, not menacing, just steady. "That's enough." But Gordon didn't know when to stop. "They can't protect you," he barked at Mason. "You're coming home with me, and you ain't saying another word to nobody." Bear didn't touch him. He didn't need to. He just shifted his stance, placing both boots squarely and folding his arms across his cut. The air changed. It was a strange thing, how a man could stand perfectly still and still block out the sun. "You put your hands on that boy again," Bear said, "and I promise you, you won't like what happens next." Gordon barked a bitter laugh. "Or what? You bikers think you can threaten me?" Razor muttered under his breath. "He has no idea how much we're holding back right now." The male officer approached, firm but calm. "Sir, we need you to step aside and answer a few questions." "I'm not talking to you," Gordon snapped. "That kid lies. His mother lies. And all of you," he jabbed a finger at the serpents, "are sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." The female officer's patience snapped like a twig. "Sir, don't take another step," she warned. But Gordon did. He took 3, heading straight for Mason. The officers moved, but Bear was faster. Again, not touching him, But stepping so close, Gordon had to stop or chest bump a man who outweighed him by nearly 100 pounds of solid steel and years of earned respect. "You heard him," Bear growled, "and you came here to scare him into silence." "That's not a crime," Gordon barked, though his voice cracked. "Actually," the male officer said behind him, "it is." Gordon spun. "What?" "We have a statement from the child," the captain said, "and from multiple teachers who witnessed your behavior this morning. And we have this," the female officer added, showing her body cam flashing red. "Every word you've said since you arrived has been recorded." Ghost smirked. "Congratulations. You just made our job easier." Gordon pointed at the serpents. "They're threatening me." Tank raised his hands dramatically. "Who us? We haven't even warmed up yet." But Gordon wasn't listening anymore. He lunged, not at Bear, not at the cops, but toward Mason. He didn't make it 2 feet. Both officers grabbed him, slammed him back against the hood of his own car, and cuffed him while he thrashed like a hooked fish. "Get off me. That's my kid. He's my kid." Mason hid behind Bear's leg again, trembling, tears streaming silently. The female officer's voice was icy. "Not anymore." Gordon was shoved upright and marched toward the cruiser. Parents clapped. Teachers wiped tears. Even a few teenagers watching from the sidewalk cheered under their breath. And Mason finally exhaled. Bear crouched down to his eye level. "You did good, kid," he said gently. "Real good." Mason wiped his face. "Is he gone?" "For a long time," Bear said. Ghost nodded. "And he ain't coming back looking for trouble. We'll make sure of that." Tank ruffled Mason's hair with surprising softness. "You're safe now." But Bear noticed something. Mason wasn't only relieved. He was terrified of what came next. No home, no safety, no certainty. Just fear in a child's eyes who'd lost the one place he slept at night. Bear glanced at his men. A single look. They understood instantly. The moment Gordon's shouts faded behind the closing cruiser door, a strange quiet settled over the parking lot. Not relief, not a celebration, just uncertainty. Mason stood frozen beside Bear, one hand clutching the bottom of the biker's leather vest, as if letting go might make the world collapse again. Teachers murmured among themselves. Parents pulled their children closer. And the iron serpents, men who'd seen war, prison yards, and the worst humanity could offer, looked at a trembling 9-year-old boy and knew this wasn't the end of anything. This was the beginning. Bear rested a hand gently on Mason's shoulder. "You hungry, kid?" Mason shrugged, eyes fixed on the ground. "I don't know." Ghost crouched down, voice softer than anyone expected. "Listen, what happens now? The cops'll get CPS involved. They'll need to figure out where you're going to stay tonight." That sentence hit the boy harder than any punch Gordon had ever thrown. Mason's face crumpled. "I don't want to go to a stranger," he whispered. "Please, don't make me." Tank exchanged a look with Bear, one that meant this kid has been making adult decisions for far too long. The male officer stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Bear, Tank, Ghost, Razor, can I talk to you for a moment?" They nodded and walked a few steps aside, leaving Razor to stay directly with Mason like a shield. The officer lowered his voice. "CPS is on the way. He can't stay with any of you long term." But he hesitated. "He seems calmer around you than anyone I've seen in a situation like this." The female officer joined them, arms crossed. "I've been doing this job for 17 years. Kids who've been abused, they latch onto whoever their instincts trust. That boy trusts you. And we take that seriously," Bear said. "I know," she replied. "Which is why I'm going to make a recommendation. A temporary one." Ghost raised an eyebrow. "Temporary like how?" "Overnight," she clarified. "Maybe 2 days. Just until CPS places him." Tank blinked. "You're saying we can take him home?" "Us. We're saying," the captain replied, "that in this moment, you four are the safest people he knows." Bear looked back at Mason, the kid leaning into Razor's side, trying not to cry, trying to be small, trying not to burden anyone. And something shifted inside the serpent's president. A memory flickered. A younger bear. A drunken father. A back alley behind a bowling alley, where he hid until his uncle found him at 2 in the morning. He knew that look. He knew that fear. He wasn't letting this kid relive it. Not ever. Ghost whistled low. Bear, you sure about this? Bear didn't hesitate. He needs somewhere safe tonight. He gets that with us. Razor smirked. We can put him in the spare room at the clubhouse. Tank nodded. I'll grab some blankets. And food. Kid looks like he eats once every 24 business hours. Ghost put a hand on Bear's shoulder. We're really doing this, huh? Bear's jaw set. We're doing this. They returned to Mason. Bear crouched down so they were eye level. Hey, kid, he said gently. I know today's been rough. Real rough. But listen, until CPS figures out where you're going to stay, you can come with us. Mason blinked. With the bikers? Tank barked a laugh. Don't worry. We don't bite. Much, Razor added. Ghost elbowed him. Ignore him. He's 90% tattoos, 10% personality. But Bear stayed focused on the boy. You're safe with us, he said. No yelling. No hitting. No walking on eggshells. Just food, a warm bed, and people who won't let anybody hurt you. Mason swallowed hard. You promise? He whispered. Bear took a knee, slow, deliberate, so the boy saw every movement. I give you my word, he said. And in our club, a promise is sacred. Slowly, cautiously, Mason reached toward him. His small hand curled into Bear's. I want to go with you, he whispered. That was all it took. The officers nodded. The teachers exhaled. Parents looked stunned and strangely relieved. But the moment they started guiding Mason toward the bikes, a new sound cut through the air. A furious engine, a horn, and the slam of a car door. Someone else had arrived. Someone who was not happy to see the Iron Serpents escorting a child toward their motorcycles. The red BMW didn't just pull into the parking lot. It lunged in, tires screeching, engine snarling, leaving the teachers and parents jumping back in shock. Bear instinctively stepped in front of Mason. Tank shifted left. Razor shifted right. Ghost pivoted back. A perfect protective box. The serpents didn't even have to speak. It was muscle memory, a formation built from years of keeping threats away from the vulnerable. The car's door ripped open, and out stepped her. A woman in a perfectly pressed blazer, high heels too expensive for the school parking lot, and a face so tight with anger it looked ready to shatter. Karen Caldwell, Gordon's sister, Mason's aunt, the only living relative he had left, and she looked like she was about to breathe fire. What? She screeched, stomping toward them. Is this circus? Why is my nephew standing with criminals? Bear didn't flinch. Mason's safe, he said calmly, which is more than I can say about the home he came from. Karen jabbed a finger toward Mason, who shrank back behind Razor's leg. Get away from them, she barked. You're coming with me right now. Mason didn't move. His fingers tightened on Razor's vest. Ghost crossed his arms. Seems like he disagrees. Stay out of this. Karen snapped. I'm his aunt. Tank shot back. And where were you when his stepdad was beating him so hard the neighbors heard it? Karen froze. Because that answer wasn't flattering. After a beat, she sputtered. I didn't know. Bear glared at her. You knew enough to avoid the house. Her eyes flicked nervously. The teachers watched her. The officers watched her. Parents watched her. And Mason? He was trembling. Not fear of the bikers. Fear of her. The female officer stepped forward. Ms. Caldwell, she said firmly, there's an active CPS investigation. You cannot take Mason right now. Karen scoffed. This is ridiculous. He's my blood. I should decide where he goes. No, Bear said, voice low. You don't get to walk back into a child's life after you destroyed it. Karen spun toward him. How dare you speak to me? Because someone has to, Razor snapped. Someone who isn't scared of your last name, or your money, or your lawyers. Karen's face twisted. You people think you're heroes? You're nothing but thugs on motorcycles. Ghost smirked. Yet here we are protecting a child, while you're yelling at him in a parking lot. A ripple went through the watching parents. Agreement, discomfort, even shame for ever believing the rumors about the serpents. Karen's voice rose. I'm calling my attorney. The male officer folded his arms. You do that. Meanwhile, CPS will be here in 5 minutes. Until then, Mason stays right where he feels safe. Mason pressed tighter into Bear's side. His voice was tiny, barely a thread of sound. I don't want to go with her. That was it. That was the line. The moment everything shifted. Karen stormed back to her car, snatched out her phone, and began pacing furiously while speaking into it. Bear leaned down to Mason. You did well, he murmured. You told the truth. That's brave. Mason nodded, eyes red. She never visited, he whispered. Not once. She only shows up when something bad happens. Tank muttered, vultures do that. Ghost added, but you're not going anywhere you don't want to, little man. Not today. Not tomorrow. The officers didn't argue. They'd seen enough. But Karen wasn't done. She slammed her phone shut, stomped back over, and pointed dramatically at the serpents. My lawyer is on the way, she declared. And when he gets here, this, she gestured around wildly, is over. Bear didn't blink. Good. He can watch CPS hand you the same recommendation they handed Gordon. Karen froze. What recommendation? The female officer answered for him. That Mason remain in protective placement. Karen's face drained of color. And, Ghost added cheerfully, we already volunteered. You what? She shrieked. Mason looked up at Bear in awe. They want me, he whispered. Bear rested a hand on the kid's shoulder. Yeah, bud. We want you to be safe. And until your life gets sorted out, that's with us. For the first time all day, Mason smiled. Just a little. But it was real. Karen Caldwell didn't pace. She stormed back and forth across the asphalt like a lawyer preparing to explode in a courtroom. The parents watched from a distance. The teachers watched from the steps. The serpents stood unmoving, Bear, Tank, Ghost, Razor, forming a wall between Mason and the woman who suddenly wanted to claim him. Then a sleek black Mercedes rolled into the lot. And everything got worse. A man stepped out wearing a $1,000 suit, sunglasses, and the kind of smirk that said he'd won every argument since the day he learned how to talk. Richard Hale, attorney, Shark, and Karen's personal attack dog. Karen practically flew at him. Richard, finally, they're obstructing custody. They're associating Mason with criminals. There. Richard lifted one finger. She froze instantly. He scanned the scene like a predator assessing prey. The officers, the teachers, the bikers, and finally, Mason, hiding behind Bear's leg. Richard smiled. A cold, calculated smile. Let's resolve this, he said smoothly, stepping toward the officers. Bear immediately shifted, blocking his path. You can talk, Bear said, but you don't walk near the kid. Richard's smile thinned. Your organization, he said slowly, gaze flicking to Bear's cut, is already dancing on the edge of a restraining order. I would tread lightly. Tank grinned. We don't dance. Razor added, we don't tread lightly either. Ghost just cracked his knuckles. Richard turned to the officers. Officers, I have documentation verifying that Miss Caldwell is the boy's next of kin and therefore the one with the legal authority to take him home. The female officer shook her head. Not during an active CPS investigation. No one moves this child until CPS arrives. And how long will that be? Richard asked. 3 minutes, she replied. Richard didn't like that answer. He turned his attention to Mason, directly at him. That was a mistake. The serpents moved in perfect sync, closing him off again. You talk to him through us, Bear warned. Richard exhaled sharply. Fine. Then I'll talk to you. This situation is highly inappropriate. Allowing a minor to remain in the custody of motorcycle gang members is outrageous. Bear corrected him, voice steady and cold. Gang is what Gordon ran. We're a family. Richard's jaw tightened. Your family has tattoos, criminal records, and illegally modified vehicles. Ghost shrugged. We also have receipts, witnesses, and footage. Richard blinked. Footage. Tank held up his phone. Everything Gordon did. Everything Karen ignored. And everything is happening right now. He tilted his head. You want that going to the local news? Karen's face went white. Richard's face went red. Because the balance just shifted. Again, the CPS car pulled in, an older woman in a gray cardigan stepping out with a clipboard and a heavy expression. Ms. Delgado. Hard-edged. No nonsense. A veteran of too many cases like this. She approached the group. Where is Mason Thompson? Mason peeked out from behind Bear's vest. Ms. Delgado crouched down to his level. Mason, she said softly, can you tell me who you feel safest with right now? Mason's lip trembled. He looked at Karen, cold, furious, shouting since the moment she arrived. He looked at Richard, smirking, calculating, speaking like Mason was a case file. Then he looked up at Bear. I want to stay with him, Mason whispered. And Tank, and Ghost, and Razor. They saved me. Ms. Delgado nodded once. That was all she needed. She straightened, turned to the officers, and said, the boy remains in protective placement with the Iron Serpents for the next 72 hours. Effective immediately. Karen exploded. What? No, this is insane. You can't. Richard tried to intervene, but Ms. Delgado cut him off instantly. Karen Caldwell, you did not visit Mason once during the last 3 years of his abuse. She turned a page on her clipboard. And you refused to return CPS calls last month. Karen sputtered. I had work. Children come before work, Ms. Delgado snapped. You failed him. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Richard stepped forward. We will be filing for emergency. No, Ms. Delgado shot back. You won't. Not today. Not until I finish this case. She pointed at Mason. And he's not going anywhere with you. Bear rested a hand gently on Mason's shoulder. You hear that, he murmured. You're safe. Mason exhaled softly, like those were the first words he'd believed in a long time. Karen screamed one last threat. This isn't over. Ghost smirked. It is for today. Ms. Delgado handed Bear a slip of paper. Temporary emergency placement. You'll take him now. Now. As in immediately. Karen froze. Richard froze. The Serpents did not. Bear knelt down. Ready to go, kid? Mason nodded. He wiped his cheeks. He straightened his little backpack. He whispered, let's go home. Bear swallowed hard. Yeah, buddy. We will. The Serpents walked him toward their bikes. Karen screamed behind them. Richard cursed into his phone. The parents watched in stunned silence. And in the middle of it all, a 9-year-old boy finally stepped toward safety. Mason clung to Bear's cute like a lifeline as the Iron Serpents surrounded him, forming a tight, impenetrable wall of leather, muscle, and engines. The school parking lot buzzed with a tense, humming silence. Teachers frozen by the door, parents watching from cars, cops standing with unsure hands hovering near holsters. But Mason wasn't looking at any of them. Only one man existed in his world right now. Caleb. His stepfather, standing 10 feet away, wrists cuffed behind him, face twisted in fury. He wasn't yelling anymore. That almost made it worse. He was smiling, a low, crooked, venomous smile, like he already knew something everyone else didn't. Bear felt Mason stiffen. Kid, he murmured, dipping his head down, talk to me. Stay with me. Mason didn't blink, didn't breathe, didn't look away from Caleb. When he finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. Don't let him take me back. Even Tank, who feared nothing, felt that line hit like a punch. Ghost's jaw locked. Razor's knuckles turned white around his gloves. And Bear felt something twisting inside his chest he hadn't felt in years. Something cold, something sharp, something protective enough to be dangerous. He crouched down in front of Mason, blocking the boy's view of Caleb entirely. Look at me. It took a second, but Mason did. That man, Bear said, voice low but steady, is not taking you anywhere. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not ever. Mason swallowed hard. But he always comes back. Not this time. Bear's tone turned immovable, steel wrapped in thunder. I give you my word. Behind him, Caleb chuckled under his breath. Cute. Real cute. The cops turned instantly, Sergeant Rowe stepping forward. Caleb Matthews, you should probably stop talking. Caleb leaned his head back, grinning like he'd already won. Why? I'm not the one threatening a kid surrounded by a damn biker gang. Tank barked a laugh. Buddy, if anyone's threatening a kid around here, it's you. Caleb smirked harder. You think this changes anything? I've got rights. That kid is. No. Bear didn't shout it. He didn't need to. Just a simple word that silenced everything. He rose to his full height, stepped forward, and stared Caleb down with a look that could peel paint. You lost any claim to that boy the day you laid a hand on him. Caleb's smile faltered. Just a fraction. But Bear saw it. So did Razor. And if you ever get out, Razor growled. Don't even breathe in his direction. Before Caleb could answer, Sergeant Rowe spoke. Matthews, you're being transported to the county for booking. Additional charges pending based on the child's testimony. Caleb turned pale, not from fear, but from rage. You think this is over? He spat. You think you're keeping him? Bear didn't react. He didn't have to. Rowe gave a quick signal. 2 officers led Caleb toward the squad car. He jerked once, twice, but they shoved him inside. When the door slammed shut, only then did Mason breathe. A small, shaky breath. The first one that didn't sound like he was drowning. Bear turned back to him. You're safe. Mason's eyes filled again, but not from fear this time. From something closer to relief. Something he hadn't felt in a long time, if ever. Can I come with you? He asked quietly. To the clubhouse. Bear exchanged glances with Tank. Then Ghost. Then Razor. All 3 gave the same nod. Bear rested a heavy hand on Mason's shoulder. Yeah, kid. You're with us. But none of them noticed what was happening across the lot. One officer stepped away from the group, pulling out his phone, dialing a number. A private number. A number that connected straight to the sheriff's office. And when he spoke, his voice was low, uneasy. Sir, we've got a situation. The Iron Serpents took the boy. Yes, that boy. He hesitated. And the club's talking about keeping him. A pause. Then, yes, sir. I understand. I'll keep an eye on them. He hung up, watching Bear lift Mason onto his bike. Watching the serpents roar to life like a moving fortress around a child they had no intention of letting go of. And he whispered to himself, this is going to get messy. The Iron Serpents rode in formation so tight, it looked like a moving barricade of chrome and armor. Mason sat in front of Bear on the massive dyna, small hands gripping the handlebars, wind snapping his hoodie as they thundered down the road. For the first time in hours, maybe in days, he felt safe, untouchable, protected by giants. But safety never lasts long for kids like him. At the clubhouse, the Serpents rolled into their compound just outside of town. A fenced-in patch of cracked asphalt, a squat brick building, and a garage full of bikes in various states of resurrection. Bear lifted Mason off the bike carefully. You hungry, kid? Mason nodded. A little. Tank snorted. Little? You look like you could eat a whole damn cow. He ruffled Mason's hair, making the boy grin despite everything. Ghost disappeared into the building. Razor stayed near Bear, scanning the road. None of them really believed the day was over. And they were right. Inside the clubhouse, the place was rough, patched leather, cracked wood, neon beer signs, but it felt warm. Safe. Lived in. Ghost placed a plate in front of Mason. Grilled cheese. Fries. An actual glass of milk. Mason stared at it like it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. He devoured half the sandwich in one go. Bear watched him quietly. Every bruise that peeked from under the collar of Mason's shirt tightened his fists. Kid, Bear said softly, how long's he been hitting you? Mason froze. A fry slipped from his hand. A while, he whispered. Did your mom know? Mason nodded. Sometimes she tried to stop him. Sometimes she didn't. Razor cursed under his breath. Tank punched the wall. This wasn't anger anymore. This was the purpose. This was a mission. Bear placed a hand on Mason's shoulder. You're not going back there. Mason swallowed. He wanted to believe it. He really did. But then, bang, bang, bang. 3 hard knocks shook the front door. Everyone froze. Then the bikers moved in perfect sync. Razor toward the hallway, Tank to the front windows, Ghost to Mason's side. Bear opened the door, and he found himself staring at Sheriff Havers, 5 deputies, 1 CPS worker with a clipboard and a sympathetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. The sheriff nodded once. Evening, Bear. Sheriff, we're here for the boy. Mason's fork clattered onto the plate. His breathing sped up. Ghost placed a hand on his back. It's all right, kid. Stay behind me. Bear stepped forward, filling the doorway like a mountain. No. Havers expected that. He sighed. You know how this works. You're not his guardians. We have to place him. Tank growled, loud enough to make one deputy flinch. Place him with whom? Another Caleb. The CPS worker interrupted gently. It's just temporary. We need to evaluate. Interview. Make sure the environment is safe. Razor barked a sharp laugh. Lady, you walked into a biker clubhouse surrounded by men who'd take a bullet for that kid. This is the safest building in the damn county. But Havers' tone hardened. He's not staying here. Move aside. Bear didn't move. Not a muscle. My club doesn't hurt kids, he said quietly. We protect them. Havers lowered his voice. And I believe that. Honestly, I do. But there are laws. Bear leaned in, then changed them. The deputies stiffened, unsure. Hands hovered near sidearms. Mason peeked from behind Ghost's leg, and when his eyes met the sheriff's, everything inside him broke loose. He ran forward, straight to Bear, grabbing the man's cute, burying his face in the leather. Please don't make me go, he begged. I'll be good. I won't cause trouble. Just don't let them take me. Silence. Thick. Devastating. Even Havers felt it. Felt the sincerity. The terror. The way the biker president rested a gentle hand on the kid's back. But duty was duty. Bear, step aside. Bear looked down at the child, gripping him like life itself. Then he looked at his brothers. Tank. Ghost. Razor. All of them are waiting for his call. He placed both hands on Mason's shoulders. Kneeling. Looking him dead in the eye. I made you a promise. His voice cracked just once. I'm not breaking it. Then he rose, turned to face the sheriff, and said the words that would change everything. For the club, the county, and the boy trembling behind his leg. You're not taking him. Haver exhaled slowly. You sure you want to start a war over this? Bear didn't blink. Try to walk past me and find out. Behind him, the serpent stepped into formation. Silent, determined, unmovable. And Mason, watching all of it, felt something he'd never felt in his entire 9 years of life. Someone was finally fighting for him. The standoff stretched across the front lot of the Iron Serpent's clubhouse like a live wire. Sheriff Havers and his deputies on one side, Bear and his outlaw wall of leather and steel on the other, and Mason, clinging to Bear's leg with white-knuckled fear, became the center of the entire county's tension. That. Havers tried one more time. Mason, he said gently, we just need to keep you somewhere safe tonight. Somewhere legal. Mason's voice trembled. It's not safe if he can find me. He didn't say Caleb's name. He didn't have to. The CPS worker stepped forward with or soft smile again. We're trained for this, sweetheart. Ghost muttered. Yeah, trained to hand kids back to the people who hurt him. Bear placed a hand on Mason's shoulder, steady but gentle. You're safe, kid. Nobody's dragging you anywhere. Havers took a breath. Bear, if you don't move, I have to. He didn't finish. Not because he was interrupted, but because a new voice entered the scene, sharp, commanding, impossible to ignore. A black SUV rolled into the lot. Everyone turned. The door opened, and Deputy Karen Ellis, the sheriff's own lead domestic violence investigator, stepped out with a thick manila folder. Havers, she said flatly. We're not taking this kid. Even Bear blinked. What? Ellis walked straight into the middle of the standoff, heels crunching on gravel, zero hesitation. I spent the last hour at the Thompson residence, she said. Interviewed neighbors. Checked hospital calls. Pulled police records. That man, Caleb Thompson, has been reported for domestic abuse 9 times. Mason's eyes widened. 9, he whispered. Ellis nodded. Your mother kept dropping the charges. She was scared. She opened the folder and handed it to Havers. Photos, statements, past injuries, evidence of threats. That kid wasn't exaggerating. Ghost muttered, called it. Tank folded his arms, smug. Havers read the first page, and his face changed. Hard. Grave. Decision made. He shut the folder, then looked at Mason. Son, he said, softer than ever. You're not going back there. Mason sagged against Bear, knees buckling in relief. The big man caught him easily. See, Bear whispered. Told you. Not on our watch. Ellis wasn't done. She pulled a second sheet from her folder. This is an emergency protective order. I can enact it now. Effective immediately. Caleb Thompson is barred from contacting or approaching Mason. Havers added. We've also dispatched units to pick him up. Tonight. The deputies behind him nodded. Mason swallowed hard. You're really getting him? Havers' expression turned iron. That man's going to jail. Tank whispered to Razor, damn. And we didn't even have to break his legs. Razor smirked. Yet. Havers. The CPS worker cleared her throat. Given the new evidence and the threat level, we're approving temporary protective placement. Bear tensed, ready to fight again. And where's that going to be? Ellis answered before the worker could. With someone the boy already trusts. She looked directly at Bear. At least until the court hearing. Silence. Shock. Relief. The CPS worker nodded reluctantly. It's unconventional. But yes, legal. Mason turned, eyes huge. You mean? I can stay here. Bear knelt in front of him. If you want to. Mason didn't hesitate. He threw his arms around the man's neck. His voice cracked into Bear's cute. I want to stay. Bear closed his arms around the boy. A man who had sworn never to raise a kid. Now holding one like he'd been waiting his whole life to protect him. The serpents stood around them. Tough men suddenly wiping their eyes. Trying to hide it behind tattoos and beards. Ghost sniffed. It's dusty out here. Tank punched his arm. Shut up. By the next morning, the story had spread. Neighbors, teachers, parents, people who had seen the bruises, but never spoke up, now flooded the sheriff's office with statements. The county chose Mason. Not Caleb. Not silence. Not fear. Havers summarized it best. Sometimes the law needs a push. Tonight, those bikers gave it one. Because sometimes heroes don't wear badges. Or suits. Or capes. Sometimes they wear worn-out leather. And carry scars of their own. The Iron Serpents understood exactly what it meant to protect the innocent. Men who'd spent their lives fighting, bleeding, and surviving. Men who weren't afraid of bullies. Systems. But, if you believe no child should face monsters alone, comment, protect every child. Your comment tells YouTube that these stories matter. That courage matters. That kids like Mason deserve to be heard. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that the greatest battles aren't fought with fists or guns, but with compassion, with courage, with people willing to stand up when everyone else looks away. And remember, heroes aren't born. They're made the moment someone decides. This child will not suffer another day. Thank you for watching. Thank you for caring. And never forget, protecting one child can change an entire world.